4 Grinning Monkeys. The following was a poem I wrote in high school. I got in a shadows from the hallway, crept into my room. Long the monkey meant to, I assumed. Never before in life had I seen a creaturette had grinned. Before I could scream. A candle's flame dances before it grows dim. One monkey man's shadow had slowly crept ye on his knees, and with ease he is perched on the edge of my bed, if you please. The silence was broken 1 inch from my ear as the monkey man whispered, "My boy, I'm right here." Now monkeys were 4 and were masked to deceive children, or even grown men, if you please. I started to tremble and covered my head, but the monkeys, all 4, crept close to my bed. Outside of my covers 4 peeled with delight. These monkey men here will take me this night? Faces with grins approach me to say, "Terry, won't you come with us and play? Come with us now, give us your hand, and we'll take you to an unbelievable land. You may not remember the last time or when, but come with us now and you'll see it again." But I said, "I know you are not what you seem, and if you are real, then why can't I scream? This night the monkey men take me with ease, and I'm but a terrified child, if you please. These things are not men that are born on this earth. Near a star to the west is the place of their birth. It matters not what I do, or I say, tonight, like the others, they'll take me away. Where shall we go and how long must I stay? Tell me, you 4, tell me now, I do pray. We're going home, Terry. There's no reason for gloom. See that star over there, just east of your moon? We traverse great distance, pick you up, and we're gonna to return you to bed before breaks the dawn. We must take from you blood and things we do need. Many entities one day will be born of your seed. When I'm taken away, can my mom hear my calls, across all of space, through brick and through walls? Will she think that I'm lost, or been seized from my bed? Will she worry I suffer or fear I am dead? She'll cry and sob while we go and play, if I don't return before dawn brings the day. And when I return, will I come back whole, or will sinister deeds take some terrible toll? We'll soon arrive at the place we do dwell. You'll see it neither is heaven nor hell, a place with 2 suns lights our days, a place that is different but also the same. The years have passed quickly as life slips from my grasp. Pray tell me, why did you hurt me, I ask? From earth you take away women and men to tag us and track us toward what an end? We are sentient beings that feel, self-aware. But you are just monkeys, and monkeys don't care. As a child I had no voice to say what may come to pass on some future day. I have the need and right to know what was done to me so many years ago. Surely you knew that one day I'd be grown, no longer helpless, no longer alone. Did you not believe that I'd live to confess the memories you stole and failed to suppress? So flawed was your sinister plan, ill-conceived, that others first scoff but then come to believe. I swear by all that is holy and all that is right, the next time you come to take me at night, when 4 little monkeys crouch near my bed, I'll take my revolver and shoot them all dead. Lots of things are scary when you're 8 years old. This night, he woke up abruptly from a deep sleep in the comfort of my warm bed. Something was wrong. It was creepy. I could sense someone was in my room. It was that creepy feeling that I wasn't alone that woke me up. It's akin to the feeling you get when you realize a stranger is staring at you. I could feel eyes on me. 2 years earlier, I had abandoned my nightlight in favor of sleeping in a darkened bedroom. I regretted it now. Each nightmare I hoped to be my last. But then I'd have another. This would be the 4th time in 2 weeks. Once more, I woke up from a deep sleep. I watched and listened, hoping they wouldn't come. Wanting more sleep but afraid to shut my eyes. My eyes strained as I scanned the darkened room for movement or shadows. Then from the corner of my eye I saw a shadow move by my closet door. As soon as I switched my gaze in its direction, it would dart somewhere else or vanish. I continued to watch and listen. I could hear faint voices, but I couldn't make out the words at first. This night I heard them before I saw them. Their words were faint and friendly at first. "Terry, everything's okay. Won't you come and play with us?" Out of the darkness stepped 4 little monkeys. They were gray and only about 2 feet tall with large yellow eyes. At first, they were kind of funny. All 4 wore the same broad grin. They had long arms and a tail. These were real monkeys and I was fully awake. The one closest to me spoke, "Come with us and we'll have fun." I heard his words in my head, but the monkey's lips never moved. Their faces were all locked in the same eerie grin. It was as if they all wore identical masks. It felt like a standoff for a moment. I considered going with them at first. But where would they take me? Did I go with them the last time? I couldn't remember. I was warned against going with strangers. These monkeys were familiar to me now. But they still frightened me. Their grins grew less friendly. Rather than a grin, it turned into more of a scary smirk. I could sense they were growing impatient with me. Now the monkey faces were evil. I thought maybe they might jump on me and just take me away. That was my real fear. I was afraid they were going to jump me and take me before I could scream for help. They might take me away from my home and I'd be lost forever in the place where children go when they vanish and are never found. They inched closer until they formed a semicircle around my bed with my back against my bookcase. The dim light from the window casts long, tall shadows against the wall. The monkeys continued to stare at me and smile. The closest one spoke again. "Come play with us. We'll have fun and we'll take you back home in just a little while." Like always, his lips never moved, he just grinned. I realized these were not my friends and this wasn't right. Then, fully awake, I screamed for my mother. I screamed so loud I woke up the whole household. When the hall light came on, the monkeys vanished in a whirl of black shadows. My dad came in and scooped me out of bed. "What's wrong? More monkeys?" He was kind, but he was justifiably annoyed. "Dad, you didn't see them." I was awake, and they were right here in my room again. He ignored my remark. "You can sleep with Mom and Dad again. But this is the last time. Okay, buddy? We're going to leave a light on for you in the hallway and you will have to sleep in your own bed. You're too old for this. You're 8 now. This has to stop." I felt embarrassed. But fear overrode my shame. I slept with my parents for a 4th night in 2 weeks. That was something I hadn't done since I was 5. I was 8 years old and didn't consider myself a little kid anymore. That night, I fell asleep between my parents, feeling safe but still nervous, until I fell asleep. I woke up to an empty bed. The school bus didn't run for another hour, so I didn't need to get up. On my way back from the bathroom I heard the word monkeys. I knew I was being discussed. I quietly walked to the stairway and sat down on the top step to listen. Over morning coffee, my sleep-deprived parents sat at the kitchen table. The haze of Dad's cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air. They talked about my recent monkeyman nightmares that had rocked the whole household. My dad took his final sip of coffee. He had to leave in a minute to get to work on time. Their discussion had to wrap up soon or he'd be late. Grabbing his lunchbox, his parting comment to my mother was, "Something has to be done. Let's leave the hall light on for a while." When he carried him into our bedroom last night, he was shaking and crying again. Wringing her hands like she always did when worried, she said, "I know. It took a long time for him to settle down." He asked my mom as if she would know the answer, "Why monkeys?" Mom just shrugged her shoulders. "Of all the things that scare him, of all the monsters he's met in past nightmares, why monkeys? I need to get a good night's sleep to work. This has got to stop." He woke both the girls too, my dad said. I felt terrible that I woke the entire family. Mom said, "I'll think about it, and I'll talk to him again. Who knows, maybe it will just stop on its own with the hall light on. I hope so. I'll think about it too. We can come up with something. Try talking to him again. See if he'll open up to you and tell you about these nightmares," Dad replied on his way out the door. With a peck on the cheek, she assured him she would talk to him. I went back to my own bed, but not back to sleep. After breakfast, my mother got my 2 sisters off to school. She held me back that day. I knew what she was going to ask. My mom began, "Honey, I want to talk to you for a minute before you go to school. I'll drive you, so you won't be late." Apologetically I began, "Mom, I'm sorry about last night. It just scared me so bad." She said, "Terry, I need you to tell me about these nightmares, so your dad and I can help you. What do these monkeys hat scares you?" "Mom, they want me to come with them. Like I told you before, there are 4 of them and they're all wearing a mask." "They all wear Sesame mask too," I said. trying to explain something so bizarre with the limited vocabulary of an 8-year-old. She pleaded, "Help me understand. Are you afraid of all monkeys, like the ones at the zoo or monkeys on the TV?" "No mom, it's just these 4 same monkeys that come in my room. They look like real monkeys, but not like on TV. These are the monkey men. The monkey men scare me. They want me to go with them. Sometimes I think I'll go. Sometimes I even think I went with them before," I said. My mother pressed on, "But you know monkeys can't hurt you. Have you tried telling them to go away? You just tell them you don't want to play with them anymore. You can do that. You can tell them to leave they alone and order them to get out. You can do that." "Okay mama. I'll try. I'll tell them to get out of my room and leave me alone. I'm afraid they might take me away with them and I might not be able to come home." I was crying now. "Honey, I don't know. You just must try. We'll leave the hall light on at night now. But you can't sleep with mom and dad anymore. It's not fair to wake up your sisters by screaming either. If you think these monkey men are real and not just bad dreams, then where do they go when the lights come on?" Mom asked. "Mom, I don't know where they come from and I don't know where they go when the light comes on either. I don't think I'm asleep when the monkey men come." I couldn't grasp it myself. Trying to communicate it to my mother was impossible. "See, you might think you are awake. It can feel like you are awake but it's all a dream. These are just bad dreams," she said with confidence. "But mom, I'm awake. I'm not asleep. I wake up and the monkey men are sneaking into my bedroom. They just step out of the dark and stare at me. I see their shadows move across my wall first," I said, hoping to make her understand. My mother was running out of patience. "Tell mama, what else do these monkeys do? They just stare at you?" I said, "Yeah mom, they smile and they're nice. They tell me they're my friends and they want to play. They want me to go with them and play someplace else. Then I get afraid because they start to look mean suddenly. I'm afraid they're going to take me away. Honey, it's okay. We'll figure this out. I bet we can find a way to monkey-proof your room and keep them away. You just have to trust mom and dad, okay?" she said with a hug. With that she wiped away the tears and I was off to school. When I came home that evening, everything seemed normal. After dinner, mom and dad ushered me into my bedroom and shut the door. Dad was holding a half-inch roll of weather stripping. I was very confused. Bending down on one knee to be at eye level, my dad confidently assured me, "Son, I can fix the problem of monkeys getting into your room at night. I bought some special tape that's guaranteed to do the trick." I asked, "You really can, Dad?" I was astounded. If they make special tape to keep them away, then that means these aren't nightmares at all. They must be real if they make tape to keep them out. I had been right all along. But I was still skeptical. "Yes, I have a special tape they use for these things," my dad said, whistling softly as he went about his work. I was unconvinced that black squishy tape could keep the monkey men away. Some part of me knew real monkeys were only in the jungle or at the zoo, but something was in my room. These are so real, and Dad just confirmed it for me. "But, if they're real, that makes them extra scary too." He finished in just a few minutes. With confidence he assured me, "This will keep you safe all night long." Dad was smiling. My mom seemed thrilled too. But I was still processing it all. If the monkey men are real, then where do they come from? My mind raced with questions. Dad said, "Okay son, you're safe from monkeys and monkey men. You can sleep with your light on too. Just until you're feeling safe again. Isn't that better than leaving on the hall light?" "Thanks Dad, thanks Mom." It seemed incredible. No more visits from the monkey men and they can't take me away. I was overjoyed. I wanted to believe. My dad had never lied to me before. A couple years of special tape did the trick. The monkey men were gone. 8 weeks passed and not a single monkey. I never again had a visit from the monkey men. I had 1 or 2 more dreams about the monkey men. But those were different. I knew those were only nightmares. The monkey men were real. Another 6 weeks went by and now it was May. Maybe the monkey men really were just dreams? I doubted it, Because the tape worked. The weather was warm now and summer vacation was just around the corner. I was outside on a beautiful Saturday. This would be a day I'd remember for a lifetime. It was cloudless with a spring breeze and an occasional wind gust. Good kite weather. The windows in the house were open. My mother was at home watching her soaps and never more than 60 feet away. There was nothing wrong with her hearing. I don't recall neighbors around. I was in the backyard shooting arrows into a block of hay. I was proud. This was an adult bow and arrow set for target shooting. Looking back, I'd never give one of my children such a lethal weapon when they were 8. It really was a different time, in so many ways. Back then. While I was loading an arrow's notch onto my bowstring, I saw a dark shadow move across the grass under my feet. I assumed it was a cloud. But the shadow made a perfect circle. I looked up. There was a large silver disc-shaped object directly over my head. I was dumbstruck. My eyes tried to take in all the details. My mind raced through everything I knew about things that could fly. What could this be? Could it hurt me? Airplanes and helicopters, I immediately dismissed. The only thing left on my mental checklist was perhaps a balloon or dirigible of some sort. But balloons are not made of aluminum and dirigibles aren't round. Balloons don't sit perfectly still in the spring breeze. Whatever this was, it was something I'd never seen before. I was overwhelmed. It was exciting too. This thing made no noise and wobbled slightly in the breeze. I'd estimate it was no more than 50 feet over my head. For some odd reason I felt compelled to put down my bow and lie down on the freshly mowed lawn and stare up at the thing for a better view. In hindsight, of course, that made no sense. But that's what I did, and that puzzles me to this day. This thing was amazingly beautiful. It was shiny and gorgeous in the way a brand new sports car is gorgeous. I called the body silver at the time. It could have been highly polished aluminum or God knows what. Its edges curled upward. But otherwise it was perfectly flat like a pancake. I remember being sorely disappointed I couldn't see the top of it. I wanted to see if there were windows. On the bottom, there were no openings or doorways of any kind. No seams or rivets. There wasn't an exhaust pipe. There was nothing printed on it. I expected to see USAF or even SSSR painted on the bottom. There were no insignias or numbers. The bottom was one seamless piece of shiny metal. Having assembled more than a few plastic model airplanes, I had a vague idea of how mechanical things were put together. I thought there should be rivets or seams visible. Whatever this was, it had to have been put together. I wished there were windows, so I could see who was driving. There could be a dome or something sitting on the top. Where do the wheels come down if it wants to land? My mind continued racing. This is anecdotal, but there was an odd static electric charge in there. I felt the fine hairs on my forearms stand up. I could smell the freshly mowed grass and ionized air. It was the scent of fresh air after a thunderstorm mixed with the sweet smell of the cut grass. There was a change in the acoustics as well. I remember that the whole neighborhood was silent. There were no cars or EVs blaring from open windows. There was nothing. I lay flat on my back looking up with a mixture of fear and amazement. This was something new. It was broad daylight in a neighborhood usually full of children. Surely dozens of people were staring at this thing just like me at that very minute. I lay there for what felt like 10 minutes. The passage of time is difficult for a child to estimate, especially under such bizarre circumstances. I have no idea how much time passed. I'm certain it was no more than 30 minutes, but it could have been as few as 10. The saucer wobbled and tilted upward at about a 30-degree angle toward the back of the house, so it'd clear the power lines. Then it silently shot off, traveling from a dead stop to the speed of a bullet. It was out of sight in a second. I had no way to estimate its speed, but it was fast. It was very fast. It traveled fast enough to have been missed in the blink of an eye. To this day, I wonder why I didn't yell for my mother when I first saw it. If she had seen it too, that would have avoided so many problems. As soon as it was gone, I jumped to my feet and screamed, "Mom!" I stood there like a statue. My eyes were fixed on the hole in the sky where it had vanished. My poor mother thought I had hurt myself or, worse yet, had killed a neighbor with an arrow to the head. Other than yelling once from my mother, I don't remember screaming. But I guess I did. I must have. My throat felt raw like it feels after I yelled. My mother came running. After a quick assessment for blood, shifted her focus to stop my screaming. Grabbing me by both shoulders shook me violently, saying, "Stop it. You will stop hollering this instant. My God. The neighbors will think you've lost your mind. What is wrong with you?" My mother was always cognizant of what the neighbors might think. To her defense, it was true. Our neighbors were always on the lookout for grist to feed the gossip mill. At some point, I must have stopped screaming. In a whisper, she calmly said, "Now let's get you inside and make sure you're alright." Pulling me by the arm, she dragged me into our kitchen. My eyes were fixed on the sky until we entered the house. Once inside, the words came pouring out. I asked, "Did you see it? Did you see it, Mom?" I was afraid because it was so big and so close. I thought they might take me away or something. What was it? Was it a spaceship? What was it? I thought, my mom's a grown-up. She'll have the answer. She'll be able to explain it to me. We sat down at the kitchen table. "Terry, what you saw was probably a jet. You know what jets are. It could have been something secret the army made. I don't know what you saw, but I know for sure you did not see a flying saucer." Mom assured me. I'd seen flying saucers on television shows like The Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, My Favorite Martian, and others. Comic books galore featured stories about visitors from outer space with laser beams laying waste to buildings. But I knew those weren't real. But Mom, it looked just like the ones on TV. My mother knew he didn't lie. Besides, she wasn't there. How could she possibly know what I saw? At that moment my two older sisters came bounding in. Sensing blood in the water, they demanded to know more. Of course, my mom offered up, "Oh, Terry thinks he saw a spaceship in the backyard, and threw a fit." They pulled up chairs eager to hear the whole story. My eldest sister began with sarcasm. She asked, "Was it a real spaceship? Did the monkeys fly it? Did the monkey men come out to get you?" Then came the fits of laughter. My mother gave my sisters both a warning, "Now don't you go and tease him." She was well-intentioned, but the damage was done, and a lesson was learned. Then she promptly gave them every detail. They now had the ammunition needed to make my life hell for weeks. The abuse began without delay. I was one pissed-off 8-year-old. Why wouldn't they believe him? No one could tell me what I saw because they weren't there. My mother tried to calm me down and explain it all away as something other than a flying saucer. I wondered why. She was certain I had seen an airplane. Probably a jet of some kind. Of course, she didn't believe in flying saucers and such things. She certainly didn't want her son to tell stories that reflected badly on that family. Mom had one idea left. She asked me to draw a picture of exactly what I saw. Handing me a felt tip pen and a piece of construction paper, she sat next to me at the kitchen table. At the age of 8, I was a decent artist. I took a few moments to think about it. It didn't take me more than a minute to complete. I drew a circle. Anything I drew in 2 dimensions couldn't convey the 3-dimensional image I saw. Plus, it wasn't just the round thing in the sky. There was the ionized air, the smell of the grass, silence, and the hair on my arm standing up. It was a sensation greater than the visual sighting of a flying saucer. It was more than just witnessing something. It was a real experience. If you've ever seen a UFO up close, you understand. There's nothing else like it. No hoax could recreate the ionized air or the mixture of awe and fear. Seeing a flying disc shoot across the sky is one thing. Seeing one stopped directly over your head is an entirely different matter. Because I was so upset, my mother called a handful of neighbors and asked if anyone saw something strange in the sky. The inevitable reply was, of course, "Why no, Anne? Why do you ask?" Without realizing the repercussion from my peers in the neighborhood, my mother told them all, "Oh, Terry thinks he saw a spaceship and now he's throwing a fit." By 6 p.m. I had neighbor kids on me like a cheap suit. I'm just grateful that summer vacation was right around the corner. Soon everyone knew I'd have other amusements like summer camp and the swimming pool at the park. But for now, I was the target of opportunity. My father got home from work and was intercepted by my mom before he took off his cap. My poor dad. When he got home at the end of his day, he was tired and dirty. All he wanted was a warm bath and a hot meal. Many times, I heard my dad plead with my mom, "Unless someone eat, can't it just wait until after dinner?" Her interception was successful, and Dad was diverted into their bedroom. I could hear muffled voices, but at least no one was yelling. He came out and promptly escorted me into my bedroom and closed the door. That was worrisome. Dad said, "All right son, what happened today?" Looking unhappy, he asked, "What's all this nonsense about seeing flying saucers in the backyard?" "No Dad. There was just one flying saucer and it was," I said, trying to be clear. But I could sense it was time to squelch my excitement by his facial expression and the tone of voice. He was irritated with my answer. I told him the truth. "Before I wash half done," he rolled his eyes. I could see he was getting mad. The madder got, the faster I spoke. I hoped to convey enough information to validate my experience before he exploded. Sadly, I was unsuccessful. He said, "Now son, we've already discussed this whole thing, didn't we? Don't you remember just back in March? When we talked about the monkeys? I told you they weren't real? Remember? But Dad, if the monkey men weren't real, then why did you use that special tape to keep them out? How come it worked? You wouldn't need tape if they were just bad dreams," I said. Now he looked confused. Neither of us spoke for an awkward minute or two. "Remember Dad, you said you could keep the monkey men out? You said they make special tape that keeps away monkeys and monkey men. But it's just tape for the windows." I knew my dad had lied to me. There was no magic tape like he said. I found the bag in the garage. It was weather stripping to keep out the cold. I was 8, but I wasn't stupid. Dad clearly wasn't prepared for that. I was surprised that he kept his composure. "Terry, it worked because you believed it works, that's all. It made the monkeys go away, didn't it? Remember when we talked about monsters, ghosts, and flying saucers? Remember that?" Dad said. I was pleading now. "Yeah, but Dad, you said there were no flying saucers." "But I saw one." My dad and I had talked about flying saucers once before. There was a story about someone who saw a flying saucer on the nightly news. The news reported on a couple who saw a flying saucer in their backyard. They even let them tell all about it on the news. I remembered Dad said it was all outer space bull made up by the Russians to scare us. It sure scared me. Dad said, "Terry, I told you that ghosts, monsters, and flying saucers aren't real. Godzilla was just a man. He was just a guy in a rubber monster suit, remember? Stomping on toy buses and making those weird sounds. Remember when we talked about the satellite, Sputnik?" "Yeah Dad, you told me everything in the sky is made right here on Earth. Put together in a factory by people. Right. You know I wouldn't tell you something that's not true." He added. But I wasn't sure I could trust him to tell me the truth now. "Son, you can't walk around the neighborhood and tell people you saw a flying saucer. They'll think something's wrong with you. Or with us. Understand?" "Yes sir." I could tell my dad had reached his limit. Next, Fuel'd yell at me, and I didn't like being yelled at. He scared me when he'd. It made me cry. "Well then, let's agree that whatever you saw, it was a shiny jet. Okay? Then we can have some supper and stop all this nonsense. Everything will be okay. Now son, tell me what you saw," he said, leaning back with his arms folded. I did the unthinkable. I lied. After a pause, I swallowed hard and said, "Well, it could have been a jet. There, you see how these things are. Sometimes we can't believe our eyes. It's like the monkeys. It's all over and done with. Now we can put this whole thing to bed," Dad said, obviously pleased. Those would turn out to be a poor choice of words. The flying saucer matter wasn't put to bed. Our lies hadn't changed reality. What I saw was not a jet. What I saw was a real flying saucer. The consequences began a week later with a new round of horrific nightmares. These always began with lights in the sky and shadowy people lurking around the house at night. Then they would take a more sinister turn. Shadowy figures soon grabbed me, and I'm carried away by many hands. It was the worst kind of nightmare. It's what made the 4-monkey-men so scary. I was taken away and held down by man-sized bugs that hurt me. Intelligent 6-foot-tall praying mantis-like beings who ignored my pleas. It was impossible to abort the dream once the shadowy figures appeared. The dream had to run its entire course before I could scream. Oddly, I never had a single dream about flying saucers. Not one time. These were not the usual boogeyman under the bed dreams that all kids have now and again. These were incredibly ugly dreams. Thesey always had the same big bug thing with the head of a praying mantis. No way seeing the flying saucer caused this new round of nightmares. My parents and the whole family believed these new nightmares were centered on flying saucers. No one was listening. They were wrong, and they had never been centered on flying saucers. I had trouble making them understand they weren't connected just because the nightmares started after I saw the flying saucer in the backyard. Besides, how could the two have been connected? The flying saucer was so cool. I saw a real flying saucer and it didn't hurt me. I wanted to know who they were and where they came from. Many afternoons I searched the empty sky and wondered where they went. My dad's story that everything in the sky was made by men on Earth wasn't true. This thing came from another planet. There must be real spacemen too. If they ever came back, I wouldn't scream for my mother again. As a child, I fantasized about talking to the spacemen. I could help them. I could go to Washington as their ambassador. They could use me to communicate great things like a cure for cancer. I imagine banner headlines, "Terry works with spacemen and saves the world." A decade later I'd meet a real spaceman. It would be, up close and personal as the saying goes. Nothing in my childhood fantasies or my worst nightmare could come close to what I saw and experienced. There would be no ambassadorship in my future. No cure for cancer. No dialogue whatsoever. Only pain and terror. But seeing a flying saucer was fun. I felt special. I felt like they chose me to see them. I just knew they were friendly. They had to be good. I dealt with the teasing as well as any 8-year-old. My schoolmates dropped the whole matter in a week, moving on to new victims to torment. But my sisters would not let it go. Their teasing continued, and they upped the ante by scaring the wits out of me. Popping up unexpectedly from behind a table or waiting for me around a corner. Then they jump out and walk around robotically screaming, "Must get Terry." To this day, I don't like to be surprised. But that would all abruptly end when I retaliated. To dish out torment. I had a plan. One night, I hid under the living room sofa. I waited patiently for what felt like an hour. I was waiting for the opportunity I knew would come any minute now. Wait for it. My eldest sister Judy sat down on the sofa with her princess phone on her lap. It was her usual weeknight routine. After dinner cleanup, she'd sit on the couch and chat with her girlfriend on the phone. She'd talk until she was forced to surrender the living room and the TV to me father. I knew she was totally unaware of my presence. She began her nightly chat as only teenage girls can. Still, I waited. When I was sure she was fully engaged in her conversation, I reached out from underneath the sofa, grabbed her by both ankles, and let out a scream that would wake the dead. My sister wet her pants, and the sofa. She ran for the bathroom, and I ran for my bedroom. This got our father involved. He sat me down for a stern, talking to. In his voice reserved for the harshest of reprimands, he demanded to know, "Now what makes you think you have the right to scare your sister like that? Huh? This was the point in the conversation where I would historically act contrite and promise, "Dad, I'm sorry. It will never happen again." No way. Not this time. I want them to know what it feels like to be scared. If they don't want more of the same, you better tell them to stop teasing me. Because I felt I was on a roll, I added, "Spank me if you want to, but you better make them stop it or else." Dad was stunned. I stared him down and refused to apologize or even speak. This was not our usual father-to-son talk. This was an adult conversation. This was no longer the same 8-year-old boy. I changed. I refused to be intimidated and lied to again. It is sad to note that following this incident our relationship would never be as close. Some bit of that father-son closeness a little boy has for us dad was gone. He'd lied to me about the monkey tape. I'd always been told the truth was a valuable thing. My father softened his tone. I'll speak with them, they won't tease you anymore. Is there anything you want Dad to know? You can always talk to Dad. Nope, that's it. Thank you, Dad. My sisters never teased me again. Years later, they both told me there was a marked change in my behavior shortly after I saw the flying saucer. I started to avoid being outside after dark. When the streetlights came on, I would run for the safety of home. They noticed other things. We had a neighbor. She was a very kind Asian woman we all called Sue. She had an amazing flower garden and would bake delicious things for us. I'd known her all my life, but now her appearance made me nervous and I began avoiding her. I had a new fear of being out in open spaces. This was something new too. I felt threatened by something, but I couldn't pinpoint what made me feel uncomfortable. Since seeing the flying saucer in my backyard, my belief system had changed radically. I learned that grown-ups don't know all the answers and they don't always tell the truth. There was something else in the universe, out in all the stars in the night sky. But grown-ups refused to discuss it. Whenever the subject came up, my dad's commentary was always the same: that's all a load of crap. Or, the Russians are behind it all. Adults wouldn't listen to me. But I knew something. It was something big too. They were probably jealous that they hadn't been chosen to see them. Children need to feel secure and be able to trust their parents to protect them. I didn't believe they could keep me from monkeymen. Whether stripping tape be damned. I was vulnerable, and I knew it. Aside from the insecurity, what hurt the most was that they refused to believe him. I wasn't a liar. They were the ones who lied. Nighttime became unfriendly now. I wasn't sleeping well. My grades slipped, most probably due to lack of sleep. I'd wake around 2 a.m. and be unable to get back to sleep. Some nights I simply couldn't get no sleep at all. I began to dread bedtime. After a few months, my dad decided I needed to see the family doctor, who would put this flying saucer business to rest once and for all. He thought a doctor could fix my behavior like curing chicken pox or measles. My dad wanted an end to what he called the spaceship crap that was interfering with his ability to get a good night's sleep. He was tired of disruption to our usual household harmony too. He just wanted things back the way they were before that spring day in May of 1963 and back for the monkeymen. Without warning, my dad picked me up from school an hour early one day. I was hustled off to the doctor's office. Dad said, "We're going to have a little talk with the doctor and get you checked over." I knew the subject. I realized on the drive over that I had a newfound fear of the doctor too. For that matter, anyone in a lab coat made me uncomfortable. This was my first visit to the doctor since the incident months earlier. I had never been afraid of the doctor before. This time it felt different. We arrived, and my dad had a long discussion with the doctor. They were out of my earshot, of course. After a few minutes, the doctor nodded his head and turned his attention to me. I was reluctant to get on the examination table. I had never given the exam room a second thought, but now it made me fearful. I was especially anxious of the overhead examination light for some reason, and he could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The doctor sensed my anxiety. He said, "Don't worry, no shot today. I'm just going to look you over a bit." He gave me the usual, "Stick out your tongue." He pressed on my abdomen. I doubted there was any real medical examination going on here. I had become distrustful of adults. Then he casually said, "So, your dad said you saw something in the sky in the backyard. What was it?" I played innocent. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Dad tells me you saw something in the sky in your backyard. He said it scared you and now you're having dreams about flying saucers." "Yeah, I saw something. I have nightmares too. But not about flying saucers." In a sincere voice he said, "You're not in trouble, son. Tell me what you saw. Tell me all about your bad dreams about these flying saucers." "It was a jet," I said. "Now, why would a jet give you bad dreams about spaceships?" He crossed his arms and frowned. "It just gave me bad dreams. I don't know why. I guess it could have been a jet." I felt myself tearing up. I was livid. But I tried not to cry. Satisfied with my answer, he said. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, what did this jet look like? Well, it was silver, and it was in the sky, but that's all. Well, I'm going to ask Dad to leave the room and then we can talk, okay? My dad picked up the cue and left the exam room. He began, now, you can trust me, boy. I'm your doctor. I want you to be well. You need to be a man now and tell me everything you saw that day. Man to man. I thought about it for a while. Honestly, I wanted to tell someone who would believe me. Against my better judgment, I decided to trust him. He told him the true story. It was more like I spewed out the story. It came out of me in a torrent. It felt good to get it all out. He listened and occasionally nodded, but he never changed his facial expression to betray what he really thought. Once I'd finished, he asked my dad to come back into the examination room. What kind of TV shows is he watching? They had a discussion. They spoke as if I wasn't even in the room. I was baffled. Why would the doctor want to know what cartoons I watched? The doctor explained his diagnosis. The problem here is an overactive imagination made worse by the influence of Space Ghost and Jonny Quest cartoons. He then shifted his focus back to me. Boy, when you were 8 years old, I corrected him, I'm 9. I'm 9 years old now. When you're 9, your mind can play tricks on you. I'm sorry you think you saw a flying saucer, but you and I both know things like that don't really exist. Don't we? He waited for my reply. I wanted to hit him. Several uneasy seconds ticked by before I said in a whisper, yes sir. The doctor looked toward my dad for acknowledgement. That's right, we know that those things only exist in comic books and television programs. Maybe in your imagination too? Like make-believe, right, boy? Even at 9 years old I knew a leading question when I heard one. I was boxed. I could only respond with a yes or a no. Yes sir. I felt defeated. While I sat on the exam table, the doctor wheeled his stool over next to me. My dad pulled up a chair next to him. The doctor then took on a stern effect. Now, repeat after me, boy. There are no flying saucers and nothing from the sky can hurt me. Now go ahead and say it. Say it loud so Dad can hear you too. There are no flying saucers, and nothing can hurt me. That's as far as I got. I welled up with tears. But I never actually cried. I was furious. I accepted that 9-year-old boys had no power. I've advised Dad to make sure you watch healthier things on television. Better yet, get outside and play some ball or ride your bike. Yes sir. I thought, yeah. I'd heard all that crap before. I'm sure to help justify his fee the doctor turned back to my dad and said, well, it's all over now. I predict 1 or 2 more nightmares and that will be the end of it. No more nightmares and no more spaceships. Obviously pleased with himself, the doctor turned to my dad and they shook hands. We headed for the car. I don't remember most of the ride home. Of course, we had to get an ice cream cone on our way. Rocky Road is the price of a 9-year-old dignity. My parents' idea of healthier television was Three Stooges reruns. Later, my taste would switch to Perry Mason. But for now, it was non-stop, Moe, Larry, and Shemp Curly depending on the episode. Slapstick's funny when you're 9. But only for so long. Pretty quickly, Moe and Larry were on everyone's last nerve. My TV restrictions were all but lifted after a few weeks of the Stooges. As for the neighborhood gossip mill, there's always new gossip. I became yesterday's news in a week or two. Talk in the neighborhood switched from Terry's UFO to teen pregnancies, extramarital affairs, and the like. It took an entire year, but eventually the nightmares died down. No thanks to the doctor who betrayed my trust. I still needed the nightlight and didn't care to be outside at night. Especially not out in the open. A few uneventful years had passed. I'm sure that we all took it for granted that life had returned to normal. I was 11 years old now. It was 1966. It was January and it was bitterly cold outside. The temperature was probably in the teens with ice and an inch or so of blowing snow. Dinner was over, and I finished my homework in short order. I had just enough time to watch a little TV before bedtime. I don't recall what I watched, but it wasn't anything spooky. It had been an ordinary day in all regards. About 9 p.m. bedtime was officially announced. I went upstairs to brush my teeth and do the whole bedtime ritual. Shortly afterward, I climbed into my bed and my mother tucked me in. The bed felt warm and cozy. I could hear the cold wind outside and felt glad to be somewhere warm. I had no difficulty getting to sleep that evening. When I opened my eyes, I found I was sitting upright in my bed. It was the middle of the night. Brilliant multicolored lights were shining through the heavy drapes and blinds that covered my window. The lights were brighter than any morning sunrise. Green and yellow lit up my bedroom like a baseball stadium at a night game. The light cast long shadows behind everything in the room. These weren't automobile headlights, they were not emergency lights from a fire truck or a police car. All the Christmas lights were stowed away for another season. But at the time I didn't give it much thought. How could I be disinterested? There was that odd noise too. It was the kind of noise made by very large machines. A pulsing mechanical hum at a steady volume. It wasn't so much loud as it was powerful. I could feel it in my chest like a bass guitar note on a giant amplifier. My bed quivered. The vibration caused the plastic airplanes on my desk to dance. One, close to the edge, fell off and onto the floor. Neither the hum nor the lights varied in intensity. They were constant, so whatever was out there, it wasn't just passing by. I sat and watched it while sitting in my bed. I knew the hum and lights were coming from outside my bedroom window. I felt oddly disinterested about what was going on. I'd characterize my mood as curiously apathetic. Usually, I'd call out for my mom. But I didn't even consider it this time. I remembered what happened when I told Mom when I was 8. Besides, there was no need to wake up the household. I was content to just watch for a while. Despite my disinterest, I felt compelled to look out the window and see whatever was out there. I don't know what I expected to see, but I wasn't afraid. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My feet hit the floor and I walked to the window. I pulled back the drapes and peeked through the blinds. Just outside my second-story bedroom window was the source of the lights and the hum. It was a flying saucer. It was shrouded in a heavy fog that rose from underneath somewhere. There it was. It was hovering over the front lawn just a few feet outside my bedroom window. It looked like the one I saw in 1963. Except this time, I could see the top. There was a dome on top just like I expected. That was the source of the lights and the hum. My only emotion was satisfaction that I finally get a peek of the top side. But that enthusiasm faded quickly as apathy overtook the excitement again. I had pulled the drapes back and I tucked a corner into the Venetian blinds. It gave me a hands-free unobstructed view. The lights were intense enough to hurt my eyes. It was hard to stare at it for more than a few seconds. It was like trying to look at the sun. I never felt the slightest bit of fear. With the compulsion to see satisfied, I felt content. I simply had no opinion or interest whatsoever. I turned around and walked back to my bed while this thing sat outside my bedroom window. Glancing back, I made a mental note of the curtains stuck in the blinds and my model airplane on the floor. I pulled covers up and fell back to sleep immediately. The morning was a weird experience too. It was as if I had just lain down, blinked, and it was dawn. It was as if no time had passed between shutting my eyes and opening them. It was like I had blinked. I had no dreams. As soon as my eyes opened, it was morning and I was fully awake and alert. A Vought F4U4 fighter plane lay upside down on the floor. At first, I was puzzled. Now how did that happen? I could have stepped on it. Then I remembered. The hum had vibrated my model airplane off my desk and onto the carpeting. There it lay, upside down on the floor. I was excited. I immediately turned my attention to the window. The curtain was tucked neatly between the Venetian blinds. Just like I'd left it. It was confirmation that what happened that evening really did happen. It was not a dream. I had no way to know for sure it had left. But if it were still outside, there'd be a lot of commotion. The household was alive with the usual morning chaos of children preparing for school. No louder than usual. This was my second sighting. I was a participant in so much as a passive observer can be a participant. This saucer was as real as the one I saw in my backyard 3 years earlier. Perhaps it was even the same flying saucer. I was puzzled by my disinterest during the whole thing. The lights and the hum replayed in my mind. Now, I had proof that this wasn't a dream. It was all the validation I needed. Now, I felt on top of the world. The one I saw 3 years earlier could have just been lost. It could have taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque, like they said in the cartoon, and just ended up in my backyard by happenstance. But now, a second flying saucer was parked outside my window. This was no mistake. They were revisiting me. I understood the difference between an accident and an on purpose. This thing purposefully visited me. I was thrilled. I had no idea what role I played in this whole affair, but I was a part of something big. I sat back on my bed smiling. My doctor, the man who violated my trust and made me lie 3 years earlier, I searched my limited vocabulary for just the right name to call him. The best word I could come up with was, asshole. I wanted so badly to tell him, Doctor, spaceships are real. And you, sir. You are an asshole. As to who piloted that spaceship back in 1963? It crossed my mind on occasion, but I never dwelt on it. After this encounter, I knew for certain that flying saucers were real. I knew that both encounters really happened. With those issues settled, my curiosity turned to who was flying these things. I tried to follow this matter to a logical conclusion. If UFOs were made in the USA, why visit me? Why wise? If these flying saucers were made by the Russians, we would have surely shot them down. Everyone knew our Air Force was superior. So, if the Russians didn't make flying saucers and they weren't from our Air Force, who else on this planet could make flying saucers? No one. They must come from another planet. If the spaceships are real, that means there must be real spacemen inside to fly them. Living beings had to build the spaceship somewhere. There had to be a spaceship factory on a faraway planet. There had to be mechanics too, guys to maintain them and fix them when they break down. When they finished their work at the end of the day, they had to have a home to go to. They probably had wives who cooked dinner like mom. There must be grocery stores, farmers, children, and schools. This was an epiphany. It added up to an entire civilization somewhere else in the sky. It was an incredibly large concept for an 11-year-old boy. If the flying saucers came from outer space, they had to come from Mars or Venus. I had no evidence to base that on except for mere rudimentary study of the Earth and planets in elementary school. I had never thought this far before. I knew. Now, I was sure that spaceships and space people were real. I knew they came from a civilization in outer space with factories and houses. I dressed for school and did my best to hide my newfound exuberance. I had an entirely fresh topic for my daydreams in arithmetic class. At breakfast, I nonchalantly asked, "Did anyone see those lights last night? It had to have been a fire truck, right?" "Nope. Never saw a thing. Slept right through it." "Una," my sister muttered with her mouth full of breakfast cereal. I was happy to know that what I saw 3 years ago was real too. My curtains and the model airplane on the floor were my proof. But I still didn't want to think about monkey men. My elation was short-lived. With the return of the flying saucer came the return of the nightmares. The stranger in my room nightmares returned with a vengeance. So did the nightmare images of big insect-like things manipulating tools with long, thin fingers. My fear of being out in open spaces returned too. Scary as hell. But they were brief this time. A couple months passed, and the nightmares became fewer and fewer. By the end of the school year, they were gone again. I never spoke about my 1963 incident to another living soul. Nor did I ever discuss the lights outside my window when I was 11. The incidents in 1963 and 1966 proved to be but a taste of what was coming. Still, I felt smug in my knowledge. I knew something other people didn't believe and wouldn't believe. I filed it away with other childhood memories that were important. These were very big issues for a little boy to process without assistance. So, I did my best. I reasoned that UFOs must be here to study us. Maybe they've been watching us for thousands of years, periodically checking in to gauge our progress. Maybe even assisting with our progress. They could have been manipulating our bodies for thousands of years and accelerating our evolution. These are friendly, space brothers here to help us out. Kind of like superheroes, I concluded. Except they were a real. Aside from fantasy daydreams and math class, I went on with my life. As the nightmares ebbed, my thoughts turned to other things. Following the 1963 incident, I learned that no one wanted to hear about flying saucers. I saw how people who said they saw a UFO were treated, like they were telling stories. I was told so often that what I saw was not a flying saucer that at times even I questioned what I saw. My life would have been much easier if they had just been a bad dream. But they were irreal. Life went on. 10 years. 10 glorious years and a mostly normal adolescence. A whole decade with nothing but an occasional nightmare. The pictures that were once in vivid color had faded around the edges. They were still there but more like aged photographs from the shoebox. Strangely, it was the scent of the grass from back in 1963 that stayed the strongest. That never faded, not even to this day. If I had to pick which of our 5 senses made for the sharpest memories, I'd have chosen things we see. Our visual images. But the fragrance of that freshly mowed grass takes me back there every time.
A close call. It was the Christmas season 1987. Extraterrestrial beings and flying saucers were the furthest thing from my mind. Those experiences were real. The memories were real too, but locked away in a vault in my mind. In a place I very rarely visited. My first 2 sightings happened when I was 8 and 11 years old, respectively. I saw 2 flying saucers. 2 silver disc-shaped objects that could have been identical. That was back when I was a child and I viewed the world like a child. Most people live their entire life without ever seeing a UFO. But I saw 2 before my 12th birthday. I reminded myself of that fact from time to time. I felt proud. That was a long time ago. Back when extraterrestrial beings were still my space brothers. During my 3rd encounter, I learned the truth. They come here from places outside of our solar system, and they are not our space brothers. I felt fortunate to have survived the 1977 event and all that followed it. Sadly, the 3rd encounter would cost my best friend his career and marriage. A few short years later it took his life. But that was 10 years ago. In 1987, I was married with a couple kids and all was well. I was working too hard but otherwise life was good. Except for a rare nightmare, my life was wonderful. Flying saucers were a closed chapter in my life. Done and over with. The whole UFO topic never made my reading list. I preferred history and non-fiction genres. We were Christmas shopping. Not my favorite pastime, but having children changes things. Buying toys brought out my inner kid. Geez, why didn't they have these when I was a kid? My wife rolled her eyes but smiled. The season was fun, and all was well. My favorite store in the mall was a big chain bookstore. I always found something cool on the 50% discount rack. Sheila was by my side and we were chatting as we walked, listening to Christmas music. We turned a corner and I stopped dead in my tracks. My knees started to buckle, and the room spun for a second. I held her shoulder to steady myself and turned away. Puzzled she asked, "What's wrong with you?" Without a word I turned around and headed for the door. Concerned I might be ill, Sheila caught up with me. "Terry, what the hell? Are you sick?" A wave of nausea washed over me. I leaned against the wall and asked her, "Please, just give me a moment." When I caught my breath, I asked her, "Holy, did you see that? I can't believe it. It was just suddenly in my face. I'm so sorry that I startled you." "Okay, oh my God, you're sweating. Who was in your face? What happened?" She was puzzled and genuinely concerned. "There's a hardcover book in there. It's on a table at the end cap. Go look at it. You'll see. Just go look at it. I'll hang right here and wait for you," I said. I was certain she'd come back and agree that the images were frightening. Back in the bookstore she found what had scared me so badly. The face of an alien on the cover of a book. It was identical to the drawings I made back in 1977 and 1979. It was the same pointed chin, the shape of head. It had just a slit for a mouth and no discernible ears. It was Thesame. That meant someone else knew. She felt unsettled by the image too. But she was far less panicked. She understood. Sheila had comforted me when those images haunted my dreams. Always supportive, she offered, "Do you want a coffee?" "Yes, but only if you're buying," I said, admitting I had literally spent my last dollar. We sat down and talked about an event that happened 10 years prior. This was a topic we very rarely discussed. But now it was unthinkable for discussion. I hoped the discussion would be brief. No matter how much discomfort it caused us, discussing it was the right thing to do. We would talk briefly about the happenings in 1977 and how it had changed both of us. Then we could close the book and go on with our lives. Just 4 months earlier, we were in the same mall when I passed a widow display being set up. It was a clothing store for women. There were 4 mannequins and they were all unclothed from the waist up and made of molded plastic. They scared the hell out of me for some reason. I felt panic overtake me. I told my wife about the anxiety and asked if we could please leave. She was annoyed, and we cut that shopping trip short. We didn't discuss it at the time. It's not like being scared by someone in hiding who jumps out and yells, "Boo!" Sure, you're startled. Your heart races for a minute and everyone has a good laugh at your expense. This is a totally different experience. There was no incident to startle me. No one yelled, "Boo!" This was a process outside of my control. It was a physiological reaction to a visual stimulus. The mannequin heads and the book cover triggered something that frightened me to the point of panic. I calmed down and my heart stopped racing, but I was left with an overwhelming sense of dread. The panic is hard to describe if you've never experienced it. It's a feeling that something awful is about to happen. I'd compare it to sitting in a stalled car on the railroad tracks while a speeding freight train rounds the bend. That level of anxiety usually took a day or two to complete. I sipped my coffee and calmed myself. Again, I was compelled to say, "Sorry. It's okay, but Terry, this is just like the mannequin heads that freaked you out a few weeks back. It's just not healthy. You're a grown man with a family and a career. It doesn't happen very often, but you have meltdowns in the mall," she said. She held my hand and we were both quiet for a moment. I'm certain we both had the same thought, 1977. Once more I felt the need to justify my actions. We just turned a corner and bam. It was right in my face. It was the abruptness of seeing the image that startled me so badly, I said. I apologized again for scaring her. She understood. Sadly, I bet many marriages don't survive such events. I was so fortunate to have married someone so understanding. In all our years of marriage, we'd never discussed my experiences as a child. But she knew the story. Family secrets are hard kept. She knew I saw a UFO when I was a child back in 1963. My sister had told her the whole story, including the fallout in the form of nightmares. It turned out to be helpful in the long run. She offered a suggestion: see our doctor, we have terrific health insurance. Get a referral to a counselor and talk to someone. Maybe you can come to terms with this and put your nightmares to bed. We both laughed at her inadvertent pun. I had to admit, it sounded like a good idea when she said it. For the most part, my life wasn't disrupted by my past encounters. There was sometimes an inexplicable drop of blood on my pillowcase. A single nightmare a year, if that. There was the occasional meltdown in a shopping mall when a mannequin head or a book cover triggered a panic attack. There was also an inexplicable discomfort when in the presence of Asian women, particularly elderly Asian women. I told her I'd consider the counseling idea. But soon I began to see it as an overreaction. I wanted to minimize the incident. I really didn't have spare time to devote to doctor appointments. I followed up on the idea for her peace of mind, for the sake of family harmony. There was no way I could speak to our family doctor. Especially if I were to be totally candid. I doubted I could do it. Instead, I simply asked for a referral and booked an appointment to see a therapist. My insurance company would pay for 10 visits. Surely more than enough. I went through the list of approved therapists covered by my health plan and chose the one nearest my office. Her name was Elizabeth something. She was 4 blocks from my downtown office. A week later, I made my way to her office. I had just a 3-minute wait before she called my name. Her office was typical. I noted her credentials as a master's degree in clinical social work MSW from Pennsylvania State. We exchanged the routine introductory politeness. Her name was Elizabeth, but she preferred to be called Beth. Before we could begin, she required that I take a battery of tests. It took an MMPI or Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory on another test I was unfamiliar with. I saw it as a waste of an entire session. I guess the tests were important. It made sense to rule out an underlying psychosis or mental illness. If you're suffering from a mental illness, can you see it when you look at your reflection in the mirror? Or is it only apparent to those around you? How do you know? At our next session, she walked me through my test results. She described them as significant in a couple ways. I had elevated levels of anxiety and paranoia. Not to the point of psychosis, but more than average. That was welcome news. Terry, people who have lived through a traumatic event have a similar symptoms and similar test scores. Your test scores were consistent with men and women suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, commonly referred to as PTSD. Yes, I've heard of PTSD. Terry, I'd like to know about your military service. Were you in combat? Fortunately, I never left the States, I replied. Terry, you've experienced a trauma in your life. We don't have to discuss the details if you don't want to. But can you tell me what happened to you?
Beth, I hesitated. A long pause filled the room.
It made me uncomfortable. Maybe that was her intent. Then I told her about the 2 flying saucers I saw as a child. But the 1977 event was strictly out of bounds. No way in hell would we discuss that event. Beth, I had 2 very strange UFO sightings in my early childhood. Everything else in my life is fine. Yes, go on, she said. I felt pressured to continue. I have frightening thoughts, intrusive thoughts. I also have horrible nightmares, just 1 or 2 a year now. And sometimes I'll see something that triggers a panic episode. That's the reason I'm here. The panic attacks are uncontrollable and just hell to experience. Yes, they are hell. That's very typical of PTSD. How do you tell the difference between an intrusive thought and a flashback? Beth asked. A flashback is usually triggered by something that brings back a flood of unwelcome images, like the face on the jacket cover of a book. The intrusive thoughts don't usually have a trigger or the same intense imagery. They seem to suddenly cross my mind and it's difficult to shut him off. I know I'm recalling events from the past, but the anxiety I saw most as bad as when it happened. Could you tell me what happened during your last panic episode? Can we start there? She asked, hoping to move forward. I told her about the meltdown I had in the bookstore and the mannequin heads. Beth said, I can understand how uncomfortable that must have been. Okay. Was all I had to offer. I sincerely doubted she understood my discomfort. She said, I believe your panic attacks are genuine and can make it hard to function at times. You saw or experienced something so horrible it left a scar on your psyche. I think we can work together. I can teach you some simple techniques to better cope with this problem. You can learn to live with this. I asked, Beth, you tell me you ruled out a mental illness and personality disorders. I am sane, at least as far as the legal definition of the term is concerned. Is that true? Yes, Terry, that's accurate in my opinion. But I am likely suffering from PTSD as an after effect of some occurrence. Am I right so far? Yes, that's correct too, she said. I heard the acoustics in their room change. Her voice was now louder. I abruptly felt annoyed with Beth. There was just something about the woman's tone of voice that irritated me. I couldn't identify exactly what quality in her voice I found irksome, but she was hard to listen to. The office seemed smaller than I remembered during my first visit too. It was just a place I'd rather not be. Can you tell me about the incident that brought you here today? I believe you told me there was an incident while in the mall? Tell me about that experience. Did that experience tip the scale for you? Is that what brought you here? Beth asked. I believe she could sense my growing anxiety. It was my wife's idea to speak with someone, I said. Then I opened up and explained the 2 incidents in the mall. I gave her all the details this time. How I felt panicked at the sight of the face on the book cover and the mannequins. I was also candid with her about the conversation my wife and I had after the last event. I can see a similarity in those 2 images. Terry, do you see anything in common between what hurt so badly in your past and the things that scared you in the mall? Do they have something in common? Beth asked. I felt my anxiety growing. The commonality between the 2 is obvious. Aside from that? Well, I saw a UFO when I was 8 and another when I was 11. I also had an experience back in 1977 when I was in the Air Force, I said, before realizing it. Oops. I had resolved not to talk about the 1977 incident. Wouldn't go there, not at all, damn it. But it was done and there's no way to take back what I said. Okay Terry, then how do those incidents from your past relate to what's going on today? I said, Beth, I saw those flying saucers not just once but a couple of times. That's what scared you so badly? She asked. I'm sure she was confused with my abrupt change of topic onto flying saucers and away from 1977. No. I raised my voice slightly. I began to feel angry for no reason. Beth was momentarily taken aback. I was shaking now and sweating. I didn't know how to answer her question. This began to feel amazingly familiar. It was like I was reliving my experience with her family doctor back in 1963. The doctor I labeled asshole. The same guy who told me, nothing in the sky can hurt you. Maybe I saw her like the doctor who violated my trust? Beth continued to probe, then what was it, Terry? What scared you? Something scared you and it's connected to your UFO sightings. I had no answer. We were both quiet for a minute or two, each waiting for the other to speak. Seizing the initiative, Beth asked, "What do you see when you have flashbacks? Do the flashbacks take you back to the incident? What do you remember?" "No, Beth, I don't remember much of anything." Truthfully, he didn't remember much. But her question triggered anxiety. Not panic, but anxiety. I didn't know it at the time, but I'd been programmed to forget and to not discuss or explore the events from 1977. "I'm sorry, Beth. I didn't mean to raise my voice earlier," I said apologetically. Mentally, I felt guilty and ashamed for some inexplicable reason. I felt like I had just revealed a clandestine family secret. I felt ill and waves-off nausea turned over in my stomach. I was trembling. I wondered if she could sense how badly I felt at that moment. She said, "Terry, it's okay. You're obviously hurting. Would you like to learn some techniques to help you deal with this anxiety?" "I can teach you." I was quick to reply, "Look, Beth, you're very kind and I appreciate your patience. I don't think I can remember and I'm not sure I want to remember. Can we quit for today?" I stood. "Of course," she said. "I'll see you next Wednesday then?" She smiled and held out her right hand. I didn't want her to feel my hand was shaking and my palm was sweaty. What followed was an awkward exchange back and forth. Eventually we managed to make contact for a brief handshake. I couldn't look her in the eye. "Yes, thank you, Beth," and I left her office. I think we both knew he wasn't coming back. I raced to my car and felt very good. As I climbed into my car I said under my breath, "That was a very close call." But in retrospect, a close call from what? Why did I feel like I had just dodged a bullet? Why did I need to run away? I also felt guilt for no reason. It was a short drive home. I had to tell Sheila something. I decided to be upbeat. My tests showed no evidence of severe mental illness. "It was all very positive," I said convincingly. "Well, that's good news. I'm glad you went for a second session. So, tell me all about it." "The therapist taught me some techniques to manage my anxiety. I'm satisfied." "I think we're done," I said. I lied. I lied to my closest friend and confidant. I knew the importance of truth. She was skeptical, but we dropped the subject. The next day I called and cancelled my appointment with Beth's receptionist. I thought, that's the end of that. A week later, Beth called me at my office. "Terry, I've cancelled your appointment. I appreciate the courtesy of your call." "You're welcome, Beth. No shows are a problem in my practice too. Terry, I think therapy would be of help to you. It's okay if you don't wish to see me again, really. That's your choice." "Thank you, Beth. The reason for my call is to see if you'd be interested in speaking to a colleague of mine." I asked her, "What can he do for me that you can't?" Beth explained, "He's a clinical psychologist. He won't charge you for his time until your insurance kicks in and I believe he's on your list of authorized providers. Would you be interested in speaking with him? I think he could help you. He works with clients who've experienced similar types of things. His name is Dr. Paul Miller. I'll leave you his number." "Sure, go ahead, Beth, I have a pen." I jotted it down on my calendar and said, "Thank you, Beth. Terry, if I have your permission, I'll give Dr. Miller the bare bones of your encounter and share your test results. That might save some time." Dr. Miller admits openly that he had an experience of his own. "Works with many clients who've seen UFOs and had similar experiences," she said. I knew her intent was to be helpful. "No, Beth, thank you. I'll just call him myself," I said. The next morning, I was on the phone with someone. I don't remember the call. It was something routine. I caught myself staring at this doctor's phone number on the margin of my calendar. In the middle of the phone call, with my fountain pen I began to change the first digit from a 5 to an S. It wasn't a conscious thought, it was just doodling. It was my usual habit to doodle on my calendar and drive my poor secretary crazy when she needed it. While we continued with our conversation, I moved to the second digit. The numeral 1 in the Michigan 517 area code. Without much thought I placed a line across the top and a 1 became the letter T. He finished my call and hung up to stare out of the window. My mind was a blank slate. It was snowing heavily, and I watched the big flakes pile up. Pen still in hand, I drew a curved line to close the numeral 7, turning it into the letter O. Moving on, it was a more difficult matter, but I changed the 4 into a lowercase p. With my fountain pen, I then obliterated the remaining 6 digits under a layer of deep blue ink. What was left was now 4 letters. I had spelled stop. I stared at it for a moment and laughed. For some reason it cracked me up. I turned the page in my calendar prematurely, to begin a new day.